What we see is more similarities with what was going on 100 years ago when the motion picture was appearing. So when it all started, there were these devices called kinetoscopes, where people just kind of a box where they looked inside, and it's a solo experience. It's very short content, and these boxes were basically everywhere. The first kinetoscopes appeared in 1894. They started spreading across the U.S., and they were like in the drugstores, in the hotels, in bars, like everywhere, right? So from the standpoint of the end of the 19th century, you can say it was a way of a portable device. Do you see any similarity with VR? Well, in our view, it's pretty much what Gear VR is, right? So it's a silo experience. You're alone there. You don't have a lot of multiplayer options there. It's usually short content. It's a cheap content. It's an easy, simple content, and it's sort of everywhere. And the same way, like American public has rejected kinetoscopes back then because it was like an individual solo experience. Quite honestly, Gear VRs didn't go too far either. The next thing that happened on the market of movies is that they started kind of broadcasting movies, not in a box, but kind of on a screen. And the first place where they started appearing, it was what? It was vaudeville theaters. In 1900, the first vaudeville theaters started putting movie experiences as a part of their presentation. So it was sort of a side entertainment to the vaudeville. The venue was, of course, designed for vaudeville, not for a movie. Now you can claim that it's roughly the same venue, but still, the primary purpose of the venue was live vaudevilles, and of course, the audience went there for a different purpose, to see a vaudeville, and the movies that they were showing, they were like a side thing. Does anybody recognize a connection to present days? I think it's sort of sorry guys from IMAX, but it's like a direct connection when we try to reverse engineer movie theaters into VR venues. Now, of course, IMAX VR has also standalone VR standalone venues, which is a different thing. Here in New York, the one that closed down was actually the one in the movie theater. Well, after placing movies and motion picture into vaudevilles, and where it also kind of didn't pick up, guys in LA figured out that, hey, why don't we put it in big stores? And Thales were the first guys, and they started putting motion picture in the storefront theaters as an addition to retail, and again, an impulse purchase. And of course, we all saw, these ads that were started to appear in malls, and then some of you guys also started your operations in malls. Many continue operations in malls, and they are, for some of you, are still successful. There were recent reports that you guys probably have seen that among the successful VR venues, dominant majority is actually standalone. It might not necessarily be the function of the fact that they're not in the mall, but it might be the function of many other factors, like what kind of a community they are in, what is it, a big or a small city, and other things. But the truth is that same as motion pictures in the beginning, our market, we have been trying to piggyback on other things, on malls, on cinemas, on attractions, on bigger arcades and things like that. But back then, 100 years ago, eventually the format that got settled and more or less started to beat its way to the mainstream was these Nickelodeon theaters. Those were small theaters. They're called Nickelodeon because it costed just a nickel to pay for it, and 5 cents. You get in. The most important thing for Nickelodeon theater was that it was a dedicated movie place, right? Some Nickelodeon theaters eventually became a little bit bigger, but most of them were smaller and simpler places. And anybody recognizes this? Well, that's basically us right now, right? That's our market. We're here. We're at the level of the Nickelodeon theaters. This is if our analogy with movie theaters is correct. If our analogy with movie theaters is correct, we can more or less project a little bit into the future and take a look, where did the motion pictures go after the Nickelodeon theaters, after those smaller dedicated venues where content wasn't actually the main thing either. People were paying 5 cents and the content was playing there continuously, rolling over and over and over again. So even though the Nickelodeons didn't create the mainstream market, but what they did, they systemized this market, right? And the next thing after the Nickelodeon theaters, roughly 10 years, 13 years into the motion picture industry, the evolution of movie palaces. So as opposed to Nickelodeon theaters where you have small to medium places, unsophisticated content, focus on middle and lower class level entertainment and, simpler type of venues, evolution of movie palaces started to bring large audience, more upscale audience, different quality audience, high budget productions eventually, and the most important thing, they became competition to Broadway. And that's our question. That's where we think eventually the VR, LBVR market might be evolving. And you can see, this image shows some of you guys, Transfinity guys from Switzerland, they are working on larger venues. The guys at Control V, building up bigger and bigger and bigger locations. The one that they're building in North Carolina is actually, they call it Coliseum, so it's going to be even bigger. VR World here in New York is a great example of a very atmospheric place where you have many devices, I think up to over 30 devices in one place. And Oculus in their OC5, they demonstrated how a big venue could also operate.